Göbekli Tepe is thought to be among the oldest archaeological sites in the world, and the only site, aside from the neighboring site of Karahan Tepe, that has this much preservation for its age. The current dating of Göbekli Tepe is set to around 9500 BC, about 11,500 years ago, during the end of the Younger Dryas. But this date is nowhere near definitive. The date of 9500 BC was determined by dating organic materials, like charcoal, found at the site. Simply dating charcoal and bones does not tell us when the actual stones were erected, and when the site first came into use. In reality, it could be thousands of years older than this, dating back all the way to the late Pleistocene. I believe that the Neolithic artifacts and remains we find here are completely out of place in relation to the advanced technology we see in the structure itself. Based on the primitive tools we find when digging here, the people would have been Stone Age hunter-gatherers. But the structure itself incorporates advanced mathematics and displays knowledge that should not have been available at this time. I think it's likely that Göbekli Tepe was built much earlier than 9500 BC. And was built as an observatory, or celestial calendar, by a people much more advanced than Neolithic man. And it was simply used by hunter-gatherers as a temple, or a place where they might remember the remnants of the lost civilization that preceded them, possibly to avoid a similar fate of these people that long since perished. There are several prominent theories involving the star alignments at Göbekli Tepe. One being the alignments to the moon and sun. The circular structures with the 12 pillars could have acted as a kind of sundial. While one of the enclosures is said by some to track the movements of the moon. Others say the enclosures were built to track the star Sirius, as it appeared on the horizon around 9000 BC. The entire complex itself is also theorized to be a single point in a complex of cities that expanded along the Tigris and Euphrates region, that perfectly reflected the constellation Eridanus. The Babylonian tablet known as the Mul Apin tells us that the 5 great original cities of Sumeria are perfect reflections of this constellation, and Göbekli Tepe falls within this alignment to the north. To construct cities and sites in such a way that they perfectly align with entire constellations in relation to other cities hundreds of miles away is unfathomable for a Neolithic people. How is it that the Sumerian mythologies, which apparently included Göbekli Tepe in their description of their great original cities, spoke of their kings and leaders possessing technology that wasn't said to be available until the Bronze Age or even Iron Age? What ancient era were they speaking of in their own histories? The Sumerians believed their civilization went back thousands of years before accepted history tells us. The Sumerian kings list among these cuneiform tablets tells us the great kings of Sumeria, of whom the well-known Gilgamesh was one of, stretched back well into the Pleistocene period before the Younger Dryas mini ice age. And the Egyptians have a similar list of their kings from this period as well, of whom the gods were always the origin of, tens of thousands of years ago. Göbekli Tepe also displays knowledge of the Zodiac Symbols. The countless animals featured on each of the 12 megalithic stones in the different enclosures have a direct relationship to the 12 zodiacs. And although we don't have an exact interpretation, it's pretty clear that these symbols are showing some sort of representation of their zodiac animals in relation to constellations. Just look at how this bird is holding the circle in one of the more well-known pillars. It looks as if it's saying the sun is in the house of the bird zodiac. This further points to it being some kind of celestial calendar, like many other ancient sites. Ancient calendars from the Mesoamericans to the Sumerians and Babylonians to the Egyptians and ancient Chinese, and many others, had a calendar that was based off the zodiac, the 12 constellations that encircle our Earth in the galaxy. And time is tracked based off the movements of these celestial bodies, as well as the movements of the sun and moon in relation to them. To understand and use this knowledge for timekeeping was not said to be done until the Bronze Age, sometime around 3000 BC in Sumeria. But here at Göbekli Tepe, they were doing it at least 6,000 years prior to that. It's more likely that this knowledge has been around much longer and was simply lost and rediscovered in the Bronze Age. Neolithic people had no means of understanding this knowledge. Yes, they could have used patterns and movements of stars and celestial bodies to assist them in daily life, like tracking seasons. But to construct massive megalithic complexes that are specifically aligned to track the same things the Mayan calendar tracked, or the ancient Chinese clocks tracked, would have taken a much more organized and advanced society. To think they knew how to do all this, but they didn't understand that if you heat up copper and mix it with tin, you get something that makes swords and armor and tools with, is absurd. I think the only explanation here is that Göbekli Tepe itself dates back much earlier, and we're dealing with a period when man lost its previous knowledge of metallurgy, timekeeping, construction, mathematics, and who knows whatever else. And we have a smoking gun. We know that the Earth went through a major climate catastrophe known as the Younger Dryas just before this period. That is a known fact. The word Göbekli Tepe itself translates to navel, Göbekli, and mound, Tepe. And the navel mound point had a sacred meaning in cultures all across the world. In Egypt, the pyramids were said to be replications of the original mound of creation, where Ra created the universe. This was also the case in Greece, and among Native Americans, on Easter Island, to name a few. Previous to its discovery, the mound that held the ruins of Göbekli Tepe was a sacred site to the local Kurdish people. Apparently, they've been using the site for sacred graves. I think this is evidence that the Neolithic people, whose remains have been found literally buried in the enclosures, could have been simply using this site as sacred graves as well, and didn't actually understand its astrological significance or historical significance. That could be why they literally carried dirt from the bottom of the hill into the enclosures to fill them. They could have very well been using the site to bury their dead and create burial mounds, like we see in places like Ireland, North America, and even China. This also makes you wonder what could have been under other mounds around the world that remain unexcavated. The entire site of Teotihuacan was found buried under mounds of dirt. What could be lying under other well-known mound sites? Turkey itself is full of these, and any of them could be housing another Göbekli Tepe. Just look at the find over at Karahan Tepe. There are probably hundreds of these sites buried under the hills out there that we just have no idea about, and probably won't for another decade. Take a look at this mound over by the ancient city of Haran. It's known as Tel Idris. Idris being the name of Enoch in the Arabic. And the oldest remains found there date back to around 8000 BC, and is also believed to have astrological alignments. Which again begs the question, what was going on in Turkey at this time? Thank you for watching this one. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, go check out the Patreon to follow some of the research I'm doing. See you next time.